Imagine yourself trapped between a raging army and an uncrossable sea. Fear grips your heart, and hope seems to fade with each passing second. But what if, at this crucial moment, the impossible happened? Welcome to the story that defied the laws of nature and changed the course of an entire nation. Today, the journey takes us to the epic crossing of Moses and the people of Israel through the Red Sea. A tale of faith, courage, and divine power that continues to inspire millions around the world. It's time to witness one of the greatest miracles ever recorded in human history. The story begins at a time of great distress for the Hebrew people. For generations, the Israelites lived as slaves in Egypt, enduring forced labor and inhumane conditions under the rule of the pharaohs. Their cries for freedom echoed through the heavens, until God heard their cries and chose an unlikely man to lead his people to freedom, Moses. Moses, a Hebrew raised as an Egyptian prince, had fled Egypt after killing a foreman who was beating a Hebrew slave. Now living as a shepherd in the lands of Midian, Moses experienced an encounter that would change his life forever. On Mount Sinai, God revealed himself to him through a burning bush, calling him to an extraordinary mission, to free the people of Israel from Egyptian slavery. Initially reluctant, Moses accepted the divine call and returned to Egypt. There, together with his brother Aaron, he faced the powerful Pharaoh, demanding the liberation of the Israelites. "Let my people go," became Moses' battle cry, echoing through the halls of the royal palace. Pharaoh, however, hardened his heart. He refused to free the slaves who were the workforce of his empire. It was then that God demonstrated his power through a series of devastating plagues, each more impressive than the last. Water turned to blood, frogs infested homes, darkness covered the land. Each plague was a testament to the power of Israel's God and a warning to the proud Egyptian ruler. The last and most terrible of the plagues was the death of all the firstborn in Egypt. On that fateful night, known as Passover, the Israelites were instructed to mark their doors with the blood of a lamb, a sign of their faith and obedience. The angel of death passed over their homes, sparing them, while every Egyptian family suffered a devastating loss. Finally, with his heart broken and his nation in mourning, Pharaoh relented. He ordered Moses to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt immediately. It was the moment that generations of Hebrew slaves had hoped and dreamed for. Freedom was within reach, and an epic journey was about to begin. As the Israelites hurried to leave Egypt, taking with them what they could carry, including the gold and silver given to them by the Egyptians, a sense of both exhilaration and apprehension hung in the air. They were leaving behind the only life they had known, embarking on a journey into the unknown, guided only by their faith in God and the leadership of Moses. The exodus from Egypt marked the beginning of a new era for the people of Israel. They were no longer slaves, but a free people, chosen by God. This transition, however, would not be easy. The slave mentality, formed over generations, would not disappear overnight. The journey that awaited them would be both physical and spiritual, a process of transformation that would shape their identity as a nation. As the people of Israel advanced away from the land of Egypt, God guided them in extraordinary ways. During the day, a pillar of cloud led them, showing them the way forward. At night, this pillar turned into a fire, illuminating the camp and providing warmth and protection. It was a constant reminder of God's presence among them, a beacon of hope on their journey to freedom. The visible presence of God was a comfort to the people, but also a challenge. Each step they took was an act of faith, moving in a direction they did not fully understand. This journey taught valuable lessons about trust and obedience, virtues that would be crucial in the days to come. However, their newfound freedom was soon threatened. Pharaoh, reeling from grief and realizing the loss of his manpower, was overcome by anger and regret. In an act of desperation and wounded pride, he assembled his army, 600 of the finest chariots, plus all his cavalry and infantry. The goal was clear: to recapture the Israelites and bring them back into slavery. Pharaoh's decision to persecute the Israelites reveals much about the nature of power and oppression. Even after witnessing God's power through the plagues, the Egyptian ruler could not accept the loss of control over his enslaved people. This persecution serves as a reminder that the struggle for freedom often meets fierce resistance from those who benefit from oppression. Meanwhile, following divine guidance, Moses had led the people on a route that seemed illogical to human eyes. Instead of taking the most direct route to Canaan, they headed south, camping near the Red Sea. It was at this seemingly dead-end location that the drama reached its climax. Picture the scene: more than 2 million people, men, women, children, and the elderly, camped by the sea. The sound of the waves mixed with the murmurs of concern that ran through the camp. Suddenly, Screams of panic began to echo. On the horizon, a cloud of dust was rapidly approaching. The Egyptian army, led by Pharaoh himself, was approaching with all its might and fury. Fear spread like wildfire among the Israelites. Before them, the vast Red Sea blocked any possibility of escape. Behind them, the most powerful army in the ancient world was rapidly approaching. Caught between a rock and a hard place, many began to question their decision to leave Egypt. Voices of despair and accusation were raised against Moses. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? This reaction of the people illustrates a profound truth about human nature. Even after witnessing extraordinary miracles, fear can quickly overwhelm faith. Freedom, with all its challenges and uncertainties, sometimes seems less appealing than the security of familiar slavery. This moment of crisis tested not only the faith of the people, but also Moses' leadership. In this critical moment, Moses' faith shone through. With a firm and confident voice, he responded to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the salvation the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, only be still." Moses' words reveal an unwavering trust in God, even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. His response was not just to calm the people, but a testament to his own faith. Moses understood that the battle was not theirs, but the Lord's. At this time, it is important to reflect on our own journeys of faith. How often do seemingly hopeless situations arise in life? The story of the Red Sea is a powerful reminder that even in the most desperate moments, there is hope. For those who are touched by this message, I invite you to like this video. Subscribing to the channel and activating the notification bell will ensure that you do not miss any of these inspiring Bible stories. Sharing this video may be the encouragement someone close to you needs today. In the comments, share, what was the most challenging situation in which God's presence was felt? As panic threatened to overtake the Israelite camp, God spoke to Moses, instructing him to stretch out his staff over the sea. What happened next was beyond any human expectation. A strong wind began to blow, parting the waters of the Red Sea. Before the amazed eyes of the Israelites, a path opened up in the middle of the sea, with walls of water rising up on both sides. This moment represents the apex of divine power in the Exodus narrative. Nature, obedient to its creator, bends to his will. The impossible becomes possible, and the path to freedom literally opens before God's people. It is a vivid testimony to divine sovereignty over all creation. It was the moment of truth. Moses, confident in the divine promise, gave the command for the people to advance. Men, women, and children began to walk along the dry seabed, between the walls of water that rose like ramparts to their right and left. The pillar of cloud and fire moved behind the people, placing itself between them and the Egyptian army, preventing the pursuers from approaching throughout the night. The crossing of the Red Sea was a journey of unprecedented faith and courage. Imagine the scene: thousands of people walking between walls of water, the sea floor beneath their feet, the deafening sound of the waves held back by the invisible limits of divine power. Children clinging to the hands of their parents, old people leaning on their families, all moving forward with a mixture of fear and wonder. This event was not only a demonstration of God's power, but also a test of the people's faith. Each step they took on the seabed was an act of trust. Fear was still present, but faith drove them forward. This collective experience of miracle and deliverance would be remembered for generations, forming the basis of Israel's spiritual identity. As the last Israelite stepped safely onto the opposite shore, the Egyptian army, blinded by arrogance and anger, decided to follow them along the path opened by the sea. Chariots and horsemen entered the seabed, determined to recapture their former slaves. But God had other plans. As the Egyptians advanced, their wheels began to sink into the mud, and panic set in among them. Too late, they realized that they were fighting against the God of Israel himself. "Let us flee from the Israelites," they cried. "The Lord is fighting for them against us." This moment of realization on the part of the Egyptians is significant. Finally, they recognize the power of Israel's God, but it is too late. Their stubbornness and pride have led them into a situation from which they cannot escape. It is a powerful reminder of the consequences of opposing God's will. At this crucial moment, God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand again over the sea. The waters, which had stood like walls all night, began to return to their place. Pharaoh's mighty army, with its chariots and horsemen, were swallowed up by the raging waves. When the sun rose that morning, the Red Sea had returned to its normal state, and the bodies of the Egyptian soldiers lay on the shore. The destruction of the Egyptian army marked the definitive end of Israel's slavery. The oppressors who had persecuted them for so long were now defeated. This act of divine judgment against Egypt also serves as a demonstration of God's commitment to protect and deliver his people. The impact of this event was profound and immediate. The biblical text tells us, "On that day the Lord saved Israel from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore." And when the Israelites saw the great power that the Lord had exercised against the Egyptians, they feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. This miracle was not only a demonstration of God's power, but also a defining moment in the history of the people of Israel. It was the birth of a nation, the moment when a group of slaves became a free people, united by faith in a God who intervenes in human history. The crossing of the Red Sea became a powerful symbol of liberation and redemption, not only for the Israelites, but for all future generations. It is a story that continues to inspire people of all cultures and beliefs, a testament to the possibility of overcoming the most impossible adversities. For the Israelites, the crossing of the Red Sea became a pillar of their national and spiritual identity. They celebrated it annually at the Passover feast, retelling the story to their children and grandchildren, keeping alive the memory of the day God delivered them with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. But the significance of this miracle goes beyond physical deliverance. It established a pattern for how God acts in human history, intervening to save his people. This pattern would be repeated throughout the history of Israel, and for Christians, would find its ultimate fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ, seen as the ultimate liberator who leads humanity from the slavery of sin to the freedom of God's grace. The crossing of the Red Sea teaches us profound lessons about faith, courage, and trust in God. It shows that even when faced with seemingly hopeless situations, God can open paths where there are none. It reminds us that faith is not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward even when we are afraid. This story also challenges us to reflect on our own journey of faith. How often do people find themselves facing their own Red Seas, situations that seem impossible to overcome? The miracle of the Red Sea encourages us to trust that God can do the impossible, that he has the power to transform the greatest obstacles into paths to freedom. The Israelites' journey, however, was far from over. The crossing of the Red Sea was only the beginning of a long pilgrimage through the desert. This journey, which would last 40 years, would be filled with challenges, miracles, and important lessons for God's people. In the days following the miraculous crossing, the initial euphoria of freedom began to give way to practical concerns. The desert was a hostile environment, with scarce water and food. The people who had just celebrated their liberation now found themselves facing new challenges. Murmuring and complaining began to arise among the Israelites. It was in this context that God continued to demonstrate his care and provision in extraordinary ways. When the people cried out for water, God instructed Moses to strike a rock, and fresh water gushed forth. When food was scarce, God provided manna, a miraculous food that appeared every morning, enough to sustain the entire people. These miracles were not just solutions to immediate problems, but profound lessons in faith and dependence on God. The Lord was teaching his people to trust him day by day, to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and trust that all other things would be added to them. The journey through the wilderness was also a time of spiritual and moral formation for the Israelites. At Mount Sinai, God established his covenant with the people, giving them the 10 Commandments and other laws that would shape their lives as a nation. This was a pivotal moment in Israel's history, when God declared, "You shall be my people, and I will be your God." However, the journey was not easy. There were times of great faith and obedience, but also times of doubt and rebellion. The incident of the golden calf, where the people, impatient with Moses' absence, created an idol to worship, illustrates the spiritual struggles they faced. This episode reminds us that faith is a journey, with ups and downs, and that patience and perseverance are essential in walking with God. The story of the Red Sea and the subsequent journey through the desert is rich in symbolism and teaching for today. It speaks of liberation, not just physical, but spiritual. Just as the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt, there is a call to spiritual freedom, leaving behind the Egypts of life, be they addictions, fears, or whatever else holds people captive. The crossing of the Red Sea teaches us about trust in times of crisis. When faced with our own Red Seas, situations that seem impossible, there is a call to trust that God can make a way where there seems to be none. It is a reminder that with God, the impossible becomes possible. The journey through the wilderness is about perseverance in faith. The life of faith is not a sprint, but a marathon. There will be times of difficulty, doubt, and even moments of wanting to give up. But there is a call to persist, trusting that God is present every step of the way. This story also teaches about the importance of community. The Israelites crossed the Red Sea and walked through the wilderness together as a people. Likewise, there is a call not to live out our faith in isolation, but in community, supporting one another on our spiritual journey. Finally, the Exodus narrative reminds us that God has a greater purpose for our lives. The deliverance of the Israelites was not an end in itself, but the beginning of a journey toward the Promised Land. Likewise, spiritual deliverance is not just for personal benefit, but so that we can be a blessing to others and fulfill God's purpose in our lives. As we reflect on the story of the Red Sea and the Israelites' journey through the wilderness, there is an invitation to examine our own journey of faith. Each person has their own story of deliverance, their own Red Seas they have had to cross, and their own deserts they have had to walk through. For those who are facing their own Red Sea right now, a situation that seems impossible, an insurmountable obstacle, it is important to remember that the same God who parted the waters for the Israelites is present today. He is able to make a way where there is no way, to bring hope where there is only despair. For those who find themselves in the wilderness, a time of spiritual dryness, trials, and hardships, it is crucial to know that just as God provided for the Israelites in the desert, He will also provide. Manna can come in unexpected ways, a word of encouragement from a friend, a verse that touches your heart, or a surprising answer to prayer. The story of the Exodus reminds us that deliverance is a process. It does not end when you leave Egypt or cross the Red Sea. It is an ongoing journey of growth, learning, and transformation. Just as the Israelites had to learn to live as a free people, there is also a need to learn to live in the freedom that faith offers. This narrative also challenges us to be agents of liberation for others. Just as Moses was used by God to free his people, there is a call to be instruments of God to bring freedom, hope, and healing to those around us. This may mean reaching out to someone who is struggling, standing up for the oppressed, or simply sharing God's love with those we meet. As we conclude this reflection on this powerful biblical story, it is important to remember, the God who parted the Red Sea is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He continues to work miracles, to open paths, and to provide in the wilderness. His faithfulness does not fail, His love does not change. May you be able to sing your own song of deliverance like the Israelites. May you be able to declare, like Moses and Miriam, "The Lord is my strength and my song, He is my salvation." May your faith be strengthened, your hope renewed, and your love for God and others deepened as you meditate on this extraordinary story. And remember, your own story of faith is a powerful testimony. As we recount the story of the Red Sea, be sure to share your own story of how God has worked in your life. Your personal testimony may be the opening sea someone needs to see to believe there is hope. As we close this video on the miracle of the Red Sea, it is crucial to remember, God continues to open seas in lives today. He is the same God of miracles, the God who makes the impossible possible. No matter what your personal Red Sea looks like, trust that God can and will make a way. If this message touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video. It could be an encouragement to someone who needs it today. In the comments, share how this story impacted your life or share a time when God parted a sea in your journey. Your testimony could be just what someone needs to hear. And don't forget, if you've made it this far and haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos about inspiring Bible stories. Together, we will continue exploring the wonders of God's Word and growing in faith. May the God who parted the Red Sea continue to make ways in your life. Until the next video, and may the peace of the Lord be with you all.